Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Louie. I'll be your moderator for today's session. Welcome to this webinar sponsored by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation, Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance Program, also known as BLC. The BLC programming is designed to assist social equity applicants in Los Angeles in obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful cannabis business. This installment of our 2025 webinar series focuses on Branding 101. Now, before we get started, let's take a moment to review some housekeeping rules. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed only on DCR's learning management system after the editing process. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. However, you will be able to see and hear all the panelists. There's an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information. Please use caution when sharing personal information in the public forum and keep your questions focused on today's topic. Please ask questions about today's subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering and responding to your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session where you will also get responses in the last portion of today's event. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen. If you use the Q&A box for questions, everyone will be able to see the questions when they are answered. Finally, please note that today's content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of Los Angeles and is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change and does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code, nor constitute legal advice. If you have any specific questions outside of today's topics, please call 213-978-0738 during business hours, Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4, to speak to a DCR representative. And now I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest presenter, Jake Kuzra. Jake is an investor, consultant, founder, and mentor advisor within the cannabis industry. As a member of NCI's Cannabis Manufacturing Committee, he regularly hosts webinars focused on the intersection of product and policy and other various areas of the industry. With 4+ years of experience serving as managing director of Founder Institute, San Francisco's accelerator program, he has deep experience helping startups to fundraise and scale. He is based in Los Angeles, California. Now I'd like to ask Jake to join me on screen. Hello, Jake. Welcome, Jake, and feel free to start sharing your presentation and enjoy your session. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I really appreciate that introduction, and as always, really honored to speak in front of this crowd. Now, the point of this webinar series at the end of the day is to, allow you to level up your companies, get them to a place that they're attractive for potential partners, investors, XYZ. So to kick things off, I really want to give a presentation that I think is going to apply to everybody. Even if you're in your earliest phases, you haven't yet built your website, your deck, any of your materials. This is just a great starting point. Branding for startups, my crash course. All of this is really 101 high level stuff. And at the end of the day, it's just designed to give you the tools you need to get things started. So without further ado, I'll start the screen share. All right. And let's play. All right. As mentioned, good to see you all today. I'm Jay Kuzarek. Of course, right off the bat, it's important to really define what a brand is. A personality that identifies a product, a service, a company, a name. It can be a name, a term, a sign, a symbol. Most people think of a brand, they think of a logo. But at the end of the day, the fonts you use, the colors you use, the different icons you use, all of these do factor into what comprises your whole brand. It's the relationship between customers, staff, partners, investors. At the end of the day, it's a relationship between what you're building and every stakeholder. That can be, like I said, investors, customers, all of them. So at the end of the day, your brand needs to be out there. It needs to be in the hands of these other people for it to really take shape, and become ultimately what it is. Because at the end of the day, the brand's in the eye of the beholder. It's how others perceive what you're doing. Now, who am I? Jake Kuzarak, as mentioned, investor, consultant. I've done a lot in and outside of cannabis, but I've spent probably the last 6 or 7 years firmly in the cannabis space outside of, some stuff back in tech. I worked for a large dev and design agency where branding was primarily what we were doing for a lot of really major companies, including, Samsung, Ritz-Carlton, and, really learned a lot of the stuff inside and out. A lot of these just a kind of an old snapshot of some of the companies I've worked with, different brand identities, different accelerators and things that I've run. Now, Coca-Cola, one of the most recognizable brands of all time. We know what this is, even without their name being right there. We know that if you have a bottle that looks like that, you got a red logo on there. They've already done a really good job of owning real estate in our minds. So you really have to have the traction for your brand identity to get established. Now, this is critical. I mean, 70% of brand managers, the aspect of branding, developing these principles is more important than sales and business development. You have to have this in place for your sales and business development to be effective. If somebody wants to work with you, wants to partner with you, wants to invest with you, they need to see something that feels mature, robust, well thought out, and professional above all else. It's the same mentality that goes into fundraising. You want to appear that you're a good steward of capital. You're somebody who knows how to use that money. You're professional, you're experienced. Your brand at every aspect, you have to kind of hammer that point in. It's the definition of faking it before you make it, is having something professional that really conveys traction and professionalism. It takes about 5 to 7 impressions on average before someone remembers your brand. And impressions are just seeing your brand out in the wild. So that means they could see your logo as a sponsor at an event. They could navigate to your website. They could hear about your brand on another podcast. So yeah, it it definitely takes a lot of work to get your brand into the eyes of the consumer. Um, Obviously 5 to 7 touch points is pretty significant, but this can be mentioned in an email. And the easiest way to start getting these touch points, ask for it. Talk to people who run mass email lists, start sponsoring events, start getting it out there and into the minds of the consumer. Now, slide 6 here, styling and branding guidelines. This is really what I want to focus on today. If you haven't really started this work, maybe you have a logo or something, this is what I want to focus on fleshing out. Maybe you have a couple fonts, but at the end of the day, I want to take you through what a good styling and branding looks like, a guide looks like, the absolute basics you need, because it's so critical to have all of this established before you go out there. So what is your brand? It's the logo, the name, the iconography, the typography, colors, the Coke example from a couple slides ago. I mean, the red and white is clearly theirs. But a single color can boost recognition by 80%, which is a staggering stat. Case in point, Spotify, that bright lime green. So something to keep in mind, especially as you see brands sometimes go a little bit too hard into too many colors. Going with a rainbow or something, unfortunately, it's hard to discern, a signature color there. So really hard to stand out, if you don't just kind of marry yourself to one certain color scheme. But there's a lot more, in my opinion, that goes into branding. Everything, even from customer service, what voice you're using when you're communicating, with customers, in your marketing copy, all of this. I mean, even your team, who you've hired, your values, your commitment to social equity, all of this is part of your brand. Um, so let's take a look at it here. Before I do, I really wanted to touch on this. I bet some people are wondering, is this going to be really expensive? Is this something I can even do today, or is this something I need to start planning for? No, rest assured, this is all stuff that you can start doing today for free. This is the quick and easy hack way of getting your brand together without shelling out tens of thousands of dollars. I'll tell you about some of those solutions, but to begin with, Canva, Logo AI, both of these tools are free. And of course, your friends and family for getting feedback. I am not a graphic designer, yet I made this flyer for an event in about 15 minutes on Canva. They have hundreds of thousands of templates you can use. And of course, this organization didn't have a proper logo. They had one that was hand drawn from a couple years ago. I went to Logo AI. I started playing around with different keywords. And ultimately, I created the logo on the top right there in about 15 minutes as well. So going from zero to a professionally styled flyer, copy, of course, the logo on there. All of that took about half an hour. So yeah, let's go a little bit deeper. This is a professional style guide. This is Spotify's. Anybody who works with Spotify, even if I'm like a media partner that's going to be speaking about them, anybody on Spotify's brand design team, marketing team is going to send this over and says, as you're talking about our brand, these are the tenets you need to follow. We really want, as you're talking about it, a tone of voice that's effortless, that's informal, that's playful, that's warm. We want to make sure that if you're using, one of two of these different colors for the logo, we don't want you changing it up, rendering it in blue or orange or something that doesn't fit our brand scheme here. Obviously, Proxima Nova Regular, that's our font. We don't want you deviating from that. A lot of these brands take this stuff really seriously. Needless to say, they spend, sometimes millions of dollars on this stuff. But of course, a lot of times this can be pulled together for a couple $100, couple $1,000. About 15,000 is pretty standard from a professional branding and design agency to pull together a full style guide for you. I'm talking multiple pages of different branding elements. But look, as mentioned, it's everything from the logo on, the websites that this is going on, of course, might not be positioned for these fonts. So sometimes the best way to make sure your branding is resonating with a potential partner is just through communication. Just talk to them and make sure that you're not misrepresenting their brand in any way. And obviously, you ensure the same as you get your brand out there into the hands of others. But photography is also extremely important because a lot of times if you have a photo of your product, this is going to be representing you guys at a trade show, in a magazine. It might be the first thing they actually see before they see your brand logo or anything is actually just photos like this. So a lot of these tenants are like, don't cover the images with copy, don't position, anywhere but the bottom right, never use in color, never use it. Yeah. So at the end of the day, the level of hand holding goes beyond just, those elements into things like photography. Now, of course, same example here. This is a lot of the do's and don'ts. It's just a straightforward breakdown of different typography, different fonts, of course, that you're going to want to use. So in something like a pitch deck, you really only want to be using 2 or 3 fonts the entire time. One for your headings, one for, the body, and of course, one that's like a highlighted accented version. So if you haven't started working on your pitch deck, start that with as a best practice. Limit yourself to just like 3 of your signature fonts here. Otherwise, I tell people when they highlight everything, they ultimately highlight nothing. Um, I really like this example. I want to touch on Starbucks, just, and I'm sure these slides are sent later. Either way, go to creative.starbucks.com. It's easy to remember. But if you go here, you can actually see everything from the different colors they use, how they like their photos, different fonts, different tone of voice. Something like this can always be taken to a designer or somebody and just tell them, hey, I kind of want to replicate this for my brand. I don't have any of this stuff yet. I like this. I like these colors. I like, here's some examples of different iconography I like. It's all just a very hand-holding process of working with a designer or doing this yourself, via one of those online tools or services. So I can't emphasize enough that you want to have this all in place before you start building, before you start putting even your products out there. I mean, imagine developing packaging and not being locked into what shade of blue you're using, and you go and you get thousands of boxes sent, and then, oh, okay, this actually isn't quite what we're looking for. And then, it doesn't match what's on your website. It doesn't match what's on your business card. It doesn't match what's even on the flyers, as you're promoting your products. You really want to have this locked in before you start doing anything. Okay. Otherwise, it's not going to feel cohesive. So next slide here, of course, social media. I did mention there's a lot of other things here that are part of your brand. Of course, 50% of social media users follow between 1 and 4 brands at very least. And I think this is only scaled dramatically in recent years. But at the end of the day, it's definitely a high number here. I really want to emphasize the importance of blogs. This is still part of your brand, and they're great to start early on in your journey. So, the one thing I tell people is when it comes to early adopters of your product, your service, your dispensary, whatever it is, If they can see your journey, they hear about you building your store, they're watching it take shape piece by piece. The people who get caught up in this and excited about this, they don't just become your early adopters, but they become the ones that are great sources of real transparent feedback. They're not usually one to hold punches. And then, of course, you can continue to tap into them as a source of referrals. If they feel brought in, they feel part of your journey, they're going to share about it. So make sure that, like I said, these early adopters, you can capture them. A blog is a great way to suck them in. And ultimately 67% more leads every month. Yes, it takes time to start building blog content, but that level of engagement says it all about the importance of this. Speak about hiring your team, speak about building out your services. So give them that inside access, develop that closer connection. Imagine a situation where the CEO of like a beverage has been going back and forth with you, telling you about fun recipes, or like, hey, mix it with some ice cream, make a float, mix it with some tea, make an Arnold Palmer. This is the kind of thing where they're going to do it at home. They might even record a video of themselves doing it, which becomes a lot more valuable than you creating your own content, showing somebody how to make a slushy or something. So even corporate culture, values, members of the public, they really do choose which brands they like to align with, based on these points. 64% for consumers. I mean, the primary reason they want to lock in with a brand is because they agree with their culture, they agree with their values, especially Gen Z. Look what happened with Bud Light. There was a huge backlash there. Look, it happened with Patagonia. Patagonia has really taken the reins when it comes to acting as a certified B Corp, letting their values be front and center. The amount of brands who go to, up and coming brands who go to their designer and say, hey, I want to replicate a lot of what Patagonia has done. I want to be values driven. I want to be about the environment. I want to be about, you know, these principles, is staggering. So, look, there's nothing wrong with following the leader. If you see somebody who spent millions of dollars, taking a certain approach and that approach resonates with you, copy it. Um, Now, of course, you have to take time to really understand, what's resonating with your audience, building in those feedback loops. I always tell people, customer service is absolutely critical, especially early on. And if you are the founder, you are the CEO, I don't care. I want you involved in that customer service conversation. Because especially early on, some of the biggest issues that bubble up, it can derail your company. You can move in the wrong direction for months, just because you didn't have your ear to the ground. You spent too long building out a feature or an element or, an area that ultimately just didn't really resonate because you weren't getting that feedback. Digitally, building out like a Google form and collecting feedback after you show someone the brand is a great way to do it. If you have people that are that level of engaged, that they're willing to sit down and type out feedback. But look, if you want feedback, bring it to them. Sit down with somebody, talk with them, have them sitting right next to you, because it's always, a lot easier, I think, to get candid thoughts that way, when they're not sitting down and they're thinking about what they're saying. They're just letting stream of consciousness flow. Um, Now, events like even our party of your brand as well, the ones you choose to tie in with, and your strategy, then kind of goes back to the values. But I will say the trade shows that you're at, even what you're doing at, your booth factors into your brand. If you're getting scantily clad booth babes at, a large show like Champs, clearly you're coming out with a very specific brand identity and you're taking a risk of alienating certain consumers. 50% of the population you're taking a risk of alienating. But of course, we still see brands take this approach. Look, at the end of the day, if even when it comes to events you're throwing internally, imagine putting together a panel and having nothing but middle-aged white dudes. You're going to get one perspective. You got to break it up. You got to get different perspectives to the table, on everything you're doing, because at the end of the day, that's how we can be stronger here. We can get diverse perspectives and build something that's going to resonate with the largest audience. Now, where can you get this assistance outside of friends who are really good at branding, or any of these AI tools? Well, in cannabis, you got Puff Creative, Hybrid Marketing, High Rise Grasslands. I mean, all these guys do great work. Some of them specialize more in PR, like Grasslands, but yeah, guys like Puff Creative and stuff are easy to work with, local to LA. Now, I really like Fiverr. When my wife ran a doula business 10 years ago, she wanted to get a logo. The very first thing I said to her is, we're going to go to Fiverr. We're going to spend 20 bucks and we're going to do the unlimited revisions, which a lot of these designers on Fiverr or Upwork, another kind of gig marketplace, they'll work with you on this. And you can keep saying, look, this isn't quite what I'm looking for. Let's tweak it. Let's make it a little bit look a little bit more like this. So yes, always pay for the unlimited revisions if they offer it, because these big design firms, that's part of what you're paying for either way. AKQA, this is like top end of the food chain stuff. I mean, six figures plus for branding. They work with like Audi, for instance. But I really like Wonder Dogs. That's the W with the plus sign. That's my friend Daria's company. They also have a sister company called Quality Produce that's very cannabis branding focused. Um, all these are great options for startups, but like I said, Upwork, Fiverr, this is where you're going to find the cheapest contractors. But I always say friends and family are important. Throw a Hail Mary out to your social network, and put up a post on your LinkedIn, for instance, and say, hey, I'm working on my brand. There's so many designers who want cannabis experience and will do work pro bono, especially for social equity founders, especially for early stage, when, there isn't a developed brand that they're modifying, they get to start from scratch. Designers love being part of that. And the big advantage of working with a real designer versus one of these AI tools is the AI tools are just kind of the same stuff recycled. Your logo is going to look really similar to somebody else who used that AI tool. So always worth calling out, and none of this matters without research. I really want to keep hammering this in. This is probably the biggest takeaway of this presentation. Your opinion on what looks good is just your opinion. It's going to be biased. Your brand does not live with you. It lives in the mind of your consumers. That needs to be your mantra. Keep repeating it. And I've seen firsthand what happens when founders get too close to their brands. Unless you're a crazy trillionaire like Elon Musk and wants to call everything X because you think it's cool and you can afford to do that, I would say take the time, be methodical, and develop a brand that's going to resonate with consumers. You got to figure out before you do, who is your ICP? Who's your ideal customer persona? The main group who's going to be interacting with your product and services. Figure out who that is, then start to work backwards. And sometimes you might be wrong. Um, you got to get it out there into the wild, start seeing who actually is engaging, and then recalibrate, around, who that audience is. Um, okay, next question here. Target audience. You really want to ask them these questions. Ask yourself these questions before you get going. Who are your primary competitors? What is the benefit of your product and service? This is my favorite. How do they feel when they're using it? That is so key to designers, because they want to use, for instance, certain colors based on how people are feeling. Case in point, a lot of social networks you'll notice use a lot of blues. Twitter back in the day, Facebook, all of it's blue. Anything pertaining to money, financial savings, green. Not surprising. Mint, Klarna, a lot of these go with green. Of course, Robinhood. Key features of your product or service, and of course your values. All of these are really important. Write these down. A mood board is funny thing to joke about, but literally Pinterest is nothing but an online mood board. Start using that to pictures of beaches or whatever resonates with you. Yeah, it's important to just start getting this stuff down on paper. Because if you just start talking to a designer and you have nothing to show them, that conversation is going to be a waste of everyone's time. And he's going to say, "Come back when you have an orientation for me here." Um, Now, I get asked these questions all the time. When should I start? And the answer is obviously immediately. Don't start producing any assets. Don't produce a deck. Don't produce a website until you have your basic branding elements together. In many cases, don't even produce a contract. If you don't have some basic branding elements in place, like a logo, style guide, other bits of collateral, the people you're trying to deal with might not feel that, you're professional. You don't want to be throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks at this stage. I'd say the biggest challenge, of course, is inconsistency. If your brand is, it's everything here. It's your values, it's how you've dressed. I've gone into a pitch event, for a company that I was actually part of, where our entire brand identity was slick, next generation technology. We're forward thinkers. When we had an investor meeting and, our founder decided to show up in a pink t-shirt and flip-flops, ignoring the fact that the people we were pitching had made all their money in real estate. They were expecting, Silicon Valley, but they were expecting, buttoned up. They weren't expecting, oh, we just strolled in here after getting Pinkberry. All of that is part of your brand. And, at the end of the day, you have to keep it consistent across the fold. If you have something that's very technical, you have something that's, maybe very the opposite. It's very cannabis culture. It's very, old throwback to 70s stoner culture. That probably should, be in how you look, how you dress, how you talk. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, being able to adapt it based on audiences. You can take a certain approach, but you still got to always bring that professionalism. How should I judge quality? Talk to branding experts, talk to others that have really well-defined brands that you might know within your same circle. I say, always build a small group of other founders at a similar stage, and start meeting every couple of weeks. This is one of the biggest things you'll get from an accelerator program. Obviously, those can be hard to get accepted to. They can be expensive in some capacity. Um, Look, if you can build your own, even with other members of, social equity founders going through the same, same work with a DCR, this is really important to tie in, like I said, not only holding each other accountable on, how does my branding look, and giving feedback, but of course, things on your pitch as well, or even reference checks, how are these people to deal with as a partner? How do I judge quality? Like I said, you shouldn't be the one judging it. It should be, how's it resonating with others? But, you do have to look at your brand all day and every day. So at the end of the day, it still needs to sit pretty well with you. Um, always ask people kind of why or why not, it is resonating. How long should this take? Easy answer here, probably anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks is pretty standard for a full styling and branding guide. As mentioned, you can get a logo knocked out in a couple days. A good logo that's been battle tested, maybe about a week. But like I said, that's why the unlimited revisions make so much sense. You want something to keep going back and making tweaks. I've covered that enough. But what I like about Logo AI is you can just take screenshots and not actually have to pay for anything, and use that to get started. They make it easy for founders. So cost, like I said, if you know somebody, a designer, giving them, they might want to do it pro bono. There are design firms, Michelle Regenbogen of Macchiato. She's come to me before and she said, "Do you have any cannabis brands? I'd love to do their work for free." That might have changed a little bit over the years, but she's still extremely affordable. I can always make an intro if anyone's interested. But yeah, you can find people that want this experience. Otherwise, $5,000 is pretty standard for something early stage. If you have a really good hookup with a designer who does branding work, but $15,000 for, like I said, full styling and branding guide from a professional firm. Desired background of the resource, you really want to look at their portfolio. If they don't have, a portfolio to show you, that's going to be a big red flag. You want to look at past brands, past branding work. If they've only done, video games and websites, but they've never done an actual logo, okay, it's something that where you might want to flag that and, and double click on that and see if they actually have done some logo work. If not, might be worth seeing what they can do, but you're taking a risk. I always ask the question, what is your design thesis? If they don't have a good answer prepared for this, they probably haven't done a lot of this sort of work. Ask questions like, what do you do in the case of revisions? What do you do? How do you work with difficult clients? How are you working with early stage founders with limited budgets? All of this can help paint a picture if they're going to be a good fit for you. And of course, get them to geek out about the brands that they love. If you feel like those brands, have great brand identities and they can justify, why that answer resonates, then yeah, I think it might be a good fit. Of course, even tools, Sketch, Envision app, all of these are pretty common for framing out a logo, a website, and showing them to you. If they don't use these tools, they just build everything in Microsoft Paint. I'd be a little bit worried. Um, I did want to add, when to move on. It's a really hard question. It's very case dependent, but oftentimes you can tell if the designer isn't really capturing what you're looking for. Maybe they're giving you too much runaround. They're dodging your phone calls. They're not giving you full attention because they have another client who's paying them more. These are things to look out for. And otherwise, I think I think that's it on this slide. There was one other thing I was trying to remember with regards to hiring design resources, but I'm sure it'll come back to me in a minute. No worries. Now, quick exercise here. What and why do you feel Coca-Cola? So maybe I'm alone here, but I'm feeling Christmas. I'm feeling, polar bears, and I'm feeling, of course, baseball and big American sports. They've spent obviously tens of millions of dollars getting their brand out there, even putting out toys, toys of the Coca-Cola bear. Start introducing it to kids at an early age and getting us indoctrinated into Coca-Cola being the end all be all of soda pop. So who doesn't have the same brand identity? Yeah, Pepsi, their biggest competitor. Why? Because they've done nothing but throw money at revisions every couple of years to be the taste of a new generation. That constant change, that constant updating, there is a method to their madness. It is intended to show, that they're constantly adapting to the youths and changes and where culture's headed. But I like to use this example. This is the classic classic example of branding gone wrong. Tropicana. They had a signature orange that they used. They had the signature straw. The red and white straw was their signature on every box. They spent over $1 million on a rebrand, which took several years. And where did it get them? A 20% decline in sales. Why? Because they got rid of the damn red and white straw that was their signature. They put this little orange cap on top. That's what they spent $1 million on. And when people were walking down the aisle, they didn't realize it was Tropicana anymore. They were just looking at the orange cap. They reverted to what they used to have. And of course, a lot of people got fired for it. So a great example of, branding experts, sometimes they need to be keeping their ear to the ground. They need to be talking to their consumers. And my favorite fact is, do you know who owns these guys? Yeah, Pepsi. So not surprising, right? So these are some good tips and tricks I'm big on for social media. As mentioned, this is part of your brand as well. You want to engage with your fans. If they're saying that they like your product, hit them back, ask them questions. Don't just thank them, start a dialogue, get them tweeting at you every day, post at influencers, ask, get them to share some content. One thing I like is the triple threat. It's basically just if I'm going to engage with a potential influencer or potential partner, I'm going to follow them. I'm going to maybe retweet or share one of their posts, which they'll always appreciate. And then I'm going to leave a comment. So having these three touch points on their feed, they're going to see, XYZ brand, boom, boom, boom. It makes it really hard for them to ignore you, especially if you're sharing and you're helping amplify their content. And I always say is if you start to build that relationship, ask for them to do the same. It never hurts to say, look, I'm a huge fan of your brand. Your following is way bigger than ours. We're just getting started. Hey, even a retweet of my newest post, anything you can do to share, this is going to mean the world to me. A lot of times they'll do it. So get bold, sometimes you can ask big celebrities. I used to tweet at Steve Martin back 15 years ago with my Thai company, and I got him to engage with me. Um, so get on all channels to help with visibility. There's so many different social media platforms out there, and it more every day. I mean, TikTok, it's just nonstop. That is really helpful for SEO. So your brand, the number one way people are going to find it is via Google. And if it's not coming up on that first page, something's wrong. This is all SEO strategy. There are firms, I like DeepRoots.io. They're local to Venice that do nothing but SEO work to get you to rank for keywords pertaining to your brand. So really good starting point to hack SEO is to just, hit every social media, spin up that blog, get some press hits. You can make swaps. Hey, I'll do a collab with you or I'll feature your brand if you're willing to cover us in your magazine. Sometimes people will do that. Give them some freebies, give them some product for one of their events. But the more your brand is out there with high domain authority websites, ones that have been around for years, if not decades, that is how you can rank in not just the top 10, but the top five. Um, don't feed the trolls is a big one. If you do get people pushing back on your brands, there's, a lot of the times it's not worth it if you can tell that they're just saying crappy things to bring you down. Sometimes if they have a really they might have a good point. It might be worth engaging with them and figuring out what their actual grievance is. But there are really delicate ways of correcting somebody who might be mistaken about something. Like, oh, I've heard your brand, doesn't have, only your pre-roll brand only uses, sweepings from your floor and it's all shake. Well, hey, I appreciate that. A lot of other brands do that, but here's a video of us actually rolling some of our pre-rolls. Easy way to dispel it without seeming like a jerk. And in cannabis, this is so critical. The amount of brands, the amount of operators out there with green in their name is staggering. It can be hard to rank for green label, green leaf, whatever, if there's another brand, obviously even in your same market, that is using those same, working for those same keywords, trying to get recognized based on the same terms. So following and unfollowing is a common tactic. There's different tools that can help with that, but you just follow everybody who follows you, and if they don't follow back, or you follow a bunch of people, and if they don't follow you back, you unfollow them in a week, so you just don't screw up your ratio. You have a higher number of people you're following versus people you're following you, but honestly, it doesn't matter too much. Analytics, targeting, going paid. At the end of the day, analytics are really important to follow. You see what time of day certain posts, certain things you're doing are resonating. This is especially if you're doing, paid advertising. You don't want to be throwing your budget into a black hole. You need to be, doing A/B tests, trying different creatives, different copy, for maybe just a couple days or a week at a time. The classic Y Combinator, the big accelerator test on your initial brand is go out, spin up a basic website with just a couple high level things and an email drop on your brand. Take $1,000, put it into an AdWords campaign, and if you get a click through rate greater than say 10%, look, clearly it's resonating with people. You don't have to break the bank to see, to try different things and see what's working with people. I'm really big on have fun, surprise people, get weird. People don't like social media that feels obvious, that feels stale, that feels boring and just self-promotional. Um, I even with a music startup, another 15 years ago, we had a huge fan in Australia, and he was constantly tweeting at us. And he was like, if you send me a T-shirt, I will put it on a kangaroo in Australia. And look, we did it, and naturally he documented it. He shared it on his own feed. All of his friends in Australia were like, "What? You're mad?" So it got a lot of engagement. It was dumb, but look, it made people laugh. People use social media to tune out and get an escape from how shitty their day to day is. Show them something that's going to make it worth it. And then posting times, I'd recommend, maybe posting, once on Facebook a week, every couple days. You don't want to oversaturate that one. It actually knocks you down in engagement if you post too frequently. Instagram, you can be rewarded, a couple times, maybe once a day, once every other couple days. It is, if there's a feed style structure, that's just a, very simple like Twitter or Instagram. If you can get multiple semi in a row, you're going to get more engagement. That's why Twitter's very this way. The old adage is always, batch, two or three tweets together over the course of an hour or two. Keep doing that every couple days just because, you want to have that constant engagement. And timing is totally random. Some of my best performing tweets and stuff were posted at 3 in the morning on a Sunday, sometimes 5 o'clock on a Friday night. You want to mix it up, just to see what's working. But at the end of the day, get on all of these, start a subreddit for your brand, get on WhatsApp, get on Quora, start talking about it. Even a SoundCloud. I was just doing a piece yesterday on Humboldt Nation. Their founder is a techno DJ. I went to their website. They had a link to their Spotify, their SoundCloud, and their SoundCloud had like a live set she did from Northern Nights Music Festival. Naturally, I put that into the article that I was writing about her. 65% of consumers feel an emotional connection with a brand. So the best way of thinking about that is they get really upset if you do something that they feel violates your values. So you, at the end of the day, want to make sure that you're very intentional about how you're speaking, and more importantly, how you're building this framework. So at the end of the day, the 5 things to start thinking about today. What insights do you have? What are the things you want to talk about? Who's your audience? What's your audience feeling as you're engaging with the brand? And do you have a framework here for launching marketing? How do you know your customers? How do you turn your customers into your greatest assets? At the end of the day, it's just through engagement. So move on to this final one here. This is what I mean about how closely, the public can feel a connection to your brand. 45% of consumers will unfollow a brand if their feed is just nothing but self-promotion. They get sick very easily if you're just yelling into the void about the same stuff. That's all I got for you today. Here's my contact information. I'm easy to follow on every platform because it's just my last name. So @/Kuzarek on LinkedIn, Google, Gmail, Instagram, everything. And of course, now I think we're going to pivot to some questions. But
Thank you, Jake. There's a lot of information there to absorb, but great. I think what I enjoy about your presentation is it kind of stimulates your personal view of the brands that we all buy or don't buy or like or dislike, and the Coke versus Pepsi thing. I mean, those wars have been going on forever. So they exist in all industries, and I think it really highlights a couple of things. Um, Before I jump into all the questions, I just wanted to comment your comment about when should I start? It
yeah,
varies so widely by entrepreneurs in this industry. Can you clarify your comment about starting immediately, and does it vary by vertical? Like depending
no.
on what vertical, 'cause,
No, I'm militant about this.
yeah,
This is why I'm so happy that this is the
yeah,
first webinar in this sequence. Because look, if you're doing, as mentioned, it lives in the eye of the beholder. It lives in the minds of other people you're interfacing with. So you
yeah.
have to have it so you can start getting that feedback from the beginning. But there's no people give you a pass early on with your
Mhm.
brand. Hey, you just got started. It's a little bit rough. Yeah, you built this in MS Paint. Which is a great thing to capitalize on. But I'd much rather knock their socks off and show them a brand that looks like it's been around for a year and have them say, "Oh, like that's incredibly impressive. You guys already look like somebody that I can do business with. You look established. You want to surprise them, not have a situation here where they're like, "Wow, you've been around for a couple years and that's your brand." That's all you
Hmm.
got. You're using 50 different fonts on your website. It looks like it was made on Wix in about half an hour. No, 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 no. You want to do this now because it's a constantly iterative process. Years down there, your brand's going to go through 50 different revisions over the course of the life cycle of your product or service.
Hmm.
A lot of them are small tweaks, even small adjustments for certain holidays. But you got to start somewhere. And like I said, even if you know you're giving your very earliest pitches, your very earliest partner conversations. If you go in there unbranded or your brand changes from one conversation to the other, they're not going to feel like, you guys you're stable.
Yeah. No, great advice, and I think that reinforcing that is critical. Let's jump into some of these. There's some really interesting questions that have evolved here. So, and you say start as soon as possible. Well, that in the BLC program, as well as maybe all cannabis entrepreneurs, they're early stage. This may pre-revenue, pre-fundraising, et cetera. So this first question is, if I only have $500 to spend on getting an initial brand together, what do you suggest I put it towards?
It's a great question. I love it. The very first thing that I would do is immediately go onto my social media, and for $0, create a post saying, I'm just launching my brand. I need designers, branding experts. If any of them are willing to work with me, my budget's extremely limited. Throw that out there. You might find somebody to do it for zero. And more importantly, ask other friends, especially if they have really large followings on some of those
Mm,
platforms, to share your post. So it obviously gets circulated to their audience as well. Um, so yeah, with 500 bucks, I would throw the Hail Mary out there to see if I could find someone to do it for free. I'd probably go to Logo AI and Canva to bang out some, initial high level branding elements myself. Either way, I can take those and show them to a designer and say, this is kind of what I'm looking for, just to get that conversation started. All of that's free. And then with the 500, I would invest that in one of two ways. If you're very services oriented and your initial businesses is going to be coming heavily from in-person introductions, I'd probably spend that money on a basic website, maybe even business cards,
Mm,
depending on what you're doing.
mhm,
Especially people who are like biomass brokers and stuff. That business
mhm,
card goes a long way.
mhm.
But generally, you want a website so they can whip out their phone and see that your stuff is real. So that's what I would do. I'd spend that $500 on, helping on a friend, if not Fiverr or Upwork, and finding someone cheap to pull together a Wix page that has your logo, that maybe you got for free, maybe you did on Canva, whatever.
Mhm.
Compelling photos in the background. If it's a consumer product, show some humans using it. If it's a joint, show some people smoking it. If it's a dispensary, show the mock-up of where, or even a photo of where the space you're going to take over is. And the biggest thing though, an email drop. You just want to make sure you're collecting emails of everybody that you're interfacing with, anybody that you're connecting with during these early stages. The biggest reason for that, so you can send them stakeholder updates. Hey, we met. Every month, hey, here's an update. The store is about 6 months away from launching. Hey, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. If anybody knows, a branding expert. But yeah, either way, collecting those emails becomes your lifeblood when it comes to launching your product and service. These are the people who have the power to engage with it, to amplify it. So start building that email list. Best way to do that. Knock out that website, and if you are able to do that all yourself, I'd spend that $500 I'd give an SEO expert $500 to sit down with me for a couple hours. And I
Yeah,
would I would really, especially in a hyper competitive space like, retail or cultivation. Yeah, I'd probably go that route.
yeah, yeah. I want to highlight something you've mentioned a couple of times. What I've learned in this industry is there is a very strong network, and the network is maybe more embracing and supportive of any industry I've been involved in to
Yep.
want to help peers and others in this space. It's amazing, and I think a super valuable asset to take advantage of.
Mhm.
And I think there's more resources out there that will help you than you realize, but you got to ask and you got to be aggressive, right? So I know you know that well as well.
I'm big on that. I'm big on that.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
never hurts
But
to ask ever,
yeah,
I'll tell you right now, in my first startup, somebody gave me the tip that if you email mcuban@gmail.com, it's literally Mark Cuban's email.
uh-huh.
I don't think it is anymore. I think the
Yeah,
secret's out. But
yeah,
back in the day, I used to kick them startup ideas and actually get feedback. Like,
yeah,
it wasn't like, hey, this is stupid, but it was like, I like this more as like a subscription for t-shirts. I wear, like it's, so either way, take
yeah,
some big swings. You never know what you're going to get back. Just
yeah,
approach people with tact, approach people in
yeah.
the same way you'd want to be approached. I made the dumbass mistake of WhatsApp messaging a top investor over, I think, literally on Christmas, saying
Mm,
happy holidays. By the way, I'd love to talk to you about my. Never heard back from him again. Nope.
right, right.
And obviously, I understand this to this day, the mistake I made. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good. And I see Melissa asking a lot of good questions about, to kind of this same questions, but in areas. But so this is just to build on that. Does anyone do branding for free? So we
yeah,
talked. You talked a little bit about that, but you said, examples like college students, firms trying to do
college
you get
students.
experience in cannabis, pro bono. I mean, and then how do you find them? Because
I
that's
can't even, yeah, I love this question.
yeah.
I can't even tell you how many schools throughout the country, universities,
Mhm.
have a cannabis club.
Yeah.
And I'm talking a dispensary. I'm talking a cannabis businesses, cannabis enthusiasts, people who are just excited about the business of cannabis. There's one that is, I think Michigan State technically it's headquartered with them, but it's an alliance of like USC, Cornell. It's a bunch of
Mm,
schools who all have cannabis business programs. And they've reached out to me before and they've said, hey, do you have any like people we can work with? We get credit for doing, case studies on these guys
mm,
or interning with them over the summer. Castleton University, for some reason, in Vermont. Lim College in New York. That's Michael Zaitsev, who was part of my accelerator. LSU has a big program now. My big tip is it can be hard to get directly to these students who
Hmm.
manage those clubs because they're constantly graduating and shit, or changing leadership roles, like the president turns out.
Hmm.
Go to the Career Development Center.
Hmm.
Every single college has a career center that, sometimes you can even say, like, I'd love to give a presentation about what we're doing. I bet the students would love to hear about the up and coming cannabis industry. You can do that. You might even find an intern that way. But that's what big on is just if you send an email, somebody who works at the career center will triage you, route you over to the right people, to maybe do that work for free. I mentioned Michelle Regenbogen. I don't think she's doing stuff for free before, but look, it's always worth a try.
Hmm.
But there's other design firms as well who want this experience.
Yeah. I love your focus on the colleges and universities because number one cannabis clubs that maybe didn't exist or weren't as visible, several years ago. But just your traditional business school or marketing and schools and graphic design schools, they're constantly looking for opportunities. I think it's a great some great advice there. Another question has come in. How frequently do companies tend to refresh or update their branding and why?
Sure. Honestly, it's I think it depends on the team. If it's a very large tech company and stuff, I mean, they usually will have somebody that their entire job is just managing the brand. But on average, I'd say usually every year or so, you want to take a look at doing a little bit of a refresh. But all of that's dependent on the feedback you're getting, and the relationships you have with your stakeholders, and if you see a real reason to update it. Um, Obviously, we see big competitors making major changes. Like for instance, if you have something that's AI and everybody has .ai and is in their logo, but after 5 years, everyone just drops the AI and just goes with the first word because AI is assumed, then you might want to follow suit. But yeah, in general, yeah, like I said, I'd refresh it. Potentially every year. The triggers to refresh it can even be things like I said, holidays. Maybe you want to do a Pride Month version, with a rainbow or something. Maybe you want to do a Black History Month, whatever you want to do. You shouldn't be afraid to throw some of those darts because it's not like a lot of the time, a temporary adjustment or a tweak to your brand. It's not the end all be all. You can just circulate it amongst a smaller audience, see if it's resonating, and then if it is, maybe you want to keep it, maybe you want to throw it out.
Hmm. Yeah, great answer. And then, maybe to the flip side of where do I spend $500? What shouldn't I waste my money on with regards to branding? Because I know you can go down a rabbit hole.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I'd say, I've seen a lot of branding where it's a really good question. A lot of paper materials and stuff in this day and age probably aren't going
Mm,
to be as valuable anymore. I've seen people flush money away when it comes to just spending so much time around tone, you know,
mm,
because I feel like if it's the designer telling you what he thinks your brand voice and tone should be, it's a lot of assumptions. They're only going by what you've told them on that one. They're not using they don't have that same connection. They're not doing customer service, for instance, and hearing on a daily basis what's going on. So when it comes to your voice, a comms guide is something that I suggest as a kind of an
mm,
internal tool. And you can build this in Notion or another tool like that. So every single person you work with, every new hire, there's just a central repository for this is how we talk about our brand. This is our 30-second pitch. This is our keywords that we like to drop. These are the big metrics we've had 1,000 subscribers. We've hit, 10,000 people have been to our dispensary. Keep that all centralized in one place. And figure out your tone and voice that way, as opposed to having
mm,
somebody who's really good at drawing, turn around and tell you, oh, maybe you should use more buzz.
hmm.
Like, come on. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, good.
but
Yeah,
it's,
good.
and I will say, I know it's
Yeah,
controversial, but I am kind of a physical business card guy. I
right.
don't think they're a waste of money with the right audiences. And
Yeah,
cannabis doesn't matter in a lot
yeah,
of places, but if it is maybe a cannabis investor event,
yeah,
or something, yeah, anything buyers and brands is just going to happen more via phone,
yeah,
direct connection that way. They're
yeah.
not going to give a shit about your business card. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I still like business cards too,
I do
right?
too.
I still ask for one from everyone, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
Because you can
Melissa
write
asked
notes
some,
on them, you know? That's
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Melissa's asked some great questions, and I want to kind of tee this one up.
Sure.
Where else can I get feedback on my branding, and how important is networking for your brand?
I mean, networking is the best way to get validation of what you're doing. So for me, feedback, put it into a blog post, show how your brand is evolving, get people to weigh in, check which ones you like the most. Put a Google form onto your social media. Hey, we're doing a branding exercise. I want your feedback. Thumbs up. Which one of these do you like? Heart, you could do like Facebook style, like, do a heart if you like number two, do a downvote if you like number three.
Mm,
Reddit, another good source. There's a couple subreddits on there, startups, entrepreneurship. I'm sure there's one pertaining to branding and design,
hmm
where I mean, I've done this myself, where I've posted different branding elements or a website, and I said, hey, I'm just looking to get some feedback on this. I don't think it's coming together the way I think it is. I'm a little bit worried it's sending the wrong message. And I got like 5 paragraphs and of like feedback from this guy being like, I'm a design consultant and I want to use this as like a case study. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is like thousands of dollars in free work just because I posted on Reddit and asked for feedback. So,
hmm
but I'm big on tapping into your local networks, getting together, going to happy hours, go to Cannabis Chamber of Commerce
Yeah.
event around the city. I throw one
Yeah.
in Silver Lake. I haven't done one in a minute, but they do one in Marina Del Rey. Show
hmm
up, talk to some people, get some feedback from other people on different sides of the industry. If you find somebody with like a designer, it's like, look, cool, let me go buy you a beer. I'll show you what I'm working on. Maybe we can go a little bit deeper.
Yep. Yeah. Great. Great. A little bit more kind of narrow, but I think a great question here. As it relates to brand, slash marketing, but how would I go about marketing to a specific demographic, i.e., senior citizens?
Yeah.
Would you modify your branding, or is it just like developing your brand to resonate, right?
Senior citizens is a little bit of a different example just because like accessibility becomes big. You
Mm,
really want to make sure that your phone or your if your website, for instance, is very easy to navigate via mobile or tablet with really big buttons. Like these are the kind of things you just learn in from marketers and stuff who've targeted these groups. You can find this feedback and stuff online. But yeah, I would say it's all just trial and error. There are big communities like the Villages, which is the largest group of senior citizens in the country in Florida. I know multiple brands who've
yeah.
tested products that they thought would resonate with senior citizens by finding a point of contact at the Villages and saying, I want to make
Mm,
you my brand ambassador. I'll dump thousands of product on you. Just go and get it out there. We'll put a
mm,
referral code on it. You can make some money and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, you find those local champions and you let them run. It can be really hard to manage something like a brand ambassador program, especially at universities. So you keep it as small as possible. You keep yourself in the mix as much as possible in the early stages, and as you have the budget and team to support it, you expand out.
yeah, great. That's a great idea. Um, and we're wrapping up on time here, but I want to ask another one that's critical is, especially with all the brands, all the competition, over the last several years, how do you maintain customer loyalty and leverage your brand, for customer loyalty?
The impossible question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's to me, I think a lot of it can be surprise and delight. Where
hmm
you send them something where maybe it's an unexpected coupon, an unexpected freebie, a little contest you're doing, they get first access to it, an event you're doing. Like I love Garden House brands. These guys are local to California. They make Dom Pen and Koa. There's a lot of vapes and a lot of infused pre-rolls out there. But what do? They have their old streetwear collection. They give out little freebies. They throw Dom Pen Studios events, which are literally just like live music, live bands. They invite, they put little QR codes. If they do a collab with a brand, that's a digital download of their album. So a lot of these things that other brands and stuff aren't doing that breaks the mold can go a long way. But look, in cannabis,
hmm
quality value, value per price point, is how you can retain a lot of that loyalty. But look, we have to acknowledge what this industry is. You can go into a dispensary and you can say, I will give you money to give me shelf space and kick this
hmm
person out. This is the
Hmm.
sad reality that we live in. And sometimes you can have all the fundamentals, and it's not going to matter if somebody has a bigger budget. The
Yeah,
amount of copycat companies, how many copycat
yeah,
Cheeto brands do we have? You know,
yeah,
they care about their brands? No, they're not making their own decisions. They're just copying what Cheetor's doing. So
yeah,
it's tough, but like I said, you build in those feedback loops and you take advantage, where you can.
yeah. Yeah, I know. Great point. And it's challenging and tough, but I would say it's challenging and tough in every industry. It's not just cannabis, right?
It is.
There are a lot of mature, crowded industries where everyone has the same challenges, and those that are successful have figured it out, and those that aren't, aren't. And it's not just unique to cannabis, which is super important because you don't want to put all these challenges just on this specific industry. It's widespread everywhere.
Stay true to your values. That's the big one I wanted to close with, is if
Yeah,
you deviate from the values, I mean, look at Flocana, the
yeah,
original promise of what that was going to be
hmm,
versus what it became, and then now the response to it after it's been relaunched. Like
yeah,
that is the classic example of the original. We're going to aggregate these small farms and
yeah,
then you build your own operation in Lake County. Come on. These are the kind
right,
of things where you can't make these same mistakes. Make sure you keep those values front and center always.
yeah. Well, great closing comments there, Jake. So we're out of time, but what a great topic and great discussion. I want to thank you again for your presentation, Jake. Thank everyone for attending this informative webinar offered by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. This webinar recording will be found on DCR's learning management system as soon as it's been edited and finalized. If you have any questions on accessing your account, please email dcr.sep@lacity.org. Thank you again for joining us and have a